Alright, so welcome back to another video editing tutorial for BH1. Now we're going to get into some complicated stuff here. This video is going to be dealing with titles and nameplates at the bottom that show who we're talking to, or if we want to display the name of our interviewee, things of that nature. So this video, you may have to pause it, open up Premiere, experiment yourself a little bit, and then resume the video so that you can stay on track. Okay, so first let's say we have this video here of Mr. Stokely, who's no longer at Baker. He actually had to move away, but he did a great job with our gear club, so we still have fond memories of Mr. Stokely. So we have this video of Mr. Stokely who's talking to all the students at Gear Club before they start their video game tournament. We had somebody walk in front of frame there. Okay, so here we have this video, and let's say that while Mr. Stokely's up there, we wanted to put his name on the screen. Now we wouldn't do it in a situation like this normally, but we're just using this for an instance. So we actually have a template in the system for our graphic that we use to show names. So I'm actually going to use that now, and then I'll also show you how to insert your own custom text and graphics. So the first thing you do is you'll go to title up there at the top. That's any text we put on the screen is called a title. So use title. We want to make a new title, and then we want to use one. We want to base our new title is going to be based on a template that is already in our system. So it's based on template. And here we go. You should have one on your computer that's called BH1 or BH1 title or BH1 slate, something of that nature. I have multiple templates for the different things that I'll edit on this computer, but BH1 title is the one that we're going to use because this is for BH1. We have our logo on there, and then that title 1 we can customize and change to the name of whoever we're trying to feature on there. Okay, so down here, the name here, this doesn't change what it says in the title box. Instead, this is changing what the name of this title file will be and how it shows up in your bin over on the left. So we're going to, I forget how to spell his name, but we're going to just call it Stokely. I'm going to hope that's right. So hit OK, and I want you to watch the bin over here. There it is. Okay, so this is our title file. It's not in our video yet. All I've done is created a file for it, and this is like a video. It's like a picture or a standalone video. So now I can click and drag it, and I can put it in my project. Now the thing with titles is we want them to show over the video. We don't want to drop the title here because it's going to erase my video. I'll show you that. See, so now our title shows up, but it erased my Mr. Stokely video. So instead, I'm going to drop his title above his video in the layer higher, and then now it'll show. See, so I hit play. There it is. And then when the red line runs past it, it'll go away. Okay. So let's show you how to edit this, because we don't want to say title 1 the whole time. You should notice that it did appear up here, but this section can get a little convoluted when you're working with multiple titles, so I'm going to give you a different process. Don't jump straight into this. If you want to edit a title that is in your timeline, the first thing you want to do is double click on that title. What that does is it activates it in this window. I know this is actually the Stokely title, but if you're working with multiple titles that all look the same, it could be very difficult to keep track of which one you're editing on. It actually tells you here, but students don't tend to check there. So what I'll tell you, just to be certain, is every time before you begin working on a title that's in a timeline, is double click it here. You'll see it activates this window. That's what the yellow box around it is. And then now I can edit my text here. Now there's a couple different ways I can do this. Sometimes when I double click down here, it automatically activates the text box for me, and I can go ahead and begin typing in it. Other times I may have to double click on the text itself. So we'll double click on the Stokely box. Okay, and then whenever your mouse has this little black square on the bottom right side of it, that means it's ready to edit some text. Okay, it's right there on the letters. I'm going to double click these letters, and now I'm in text editing mode. So now I can erase this just the way that I normally would, backspace, delete, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to type Mr. Stokely. Okay, the E and the L may be flipped, but either way. Okay, so notice my mouse looks different now. It's in text mode. That's because you have your own text tools up here. These tools are different than the tools on the bottom left down here. These are your sequence tools. These are your title tools. Okay, so I'm actually going to change now back to the mouse. And then here's my title. And there it is. It has his name. I rewind it. I hit play. And you should see his name pop up. Now, what we tend to do is we don't like it just popping up like that. Boom. So what we learned in our last video is we can use some video effects. Well, we can also use those video effects on titles because they fall in the timeline just like a video would. So I'm actually going to use a cross dissolve here, which is the blending, the fading that we use. If I use a dip to black, that doesn't really work. What it does is this image, all of this actually shows up. It's just transparent. So all of this is still in this picture in my video frame. Even though it looks like blank space, it really is here. So when I dip to black, see, all of this turns black too. Well, I don't want that, right? That looks kind of bad. Looks really weird. So I'm going to get rid of dip to black. I'm actually going to use a cross dissolve here, which is remember, we're blending things together. So what I'm going to be blending is empty space into my title. So I drag cross dissolve to the beginning. I drag cross dissolve to the end. When I hit play, his name fades in. His name fades out. And this is more commonly what we would use for interviews. If we're interviewing like an expert, this isn't a random interview segment. Let's say we're interviewing an expert, like a teacher who's giving us some insight into something. Then we would put a nameplate up there so that the first time we see them in the segment. So if for some reason our audience missed our introduction of that individual, at least the nameplate would work as well. Okay, so that's title. That's how we use our BH1 custom title. Now if you ever want to go back and edit this one, again, you double click it and edit it here. If you had more than one Stokely title, okay, more than one Stokely title, you double click this one. Let's change this one to, let's say I had a typo, M Stokely. Okay, so notice it shows up here. And when I go to the other title, it also changed. Okay, so you cannot use the same title over and over and over for separate people. Okay, so if I had another person in this segment that I wanted to put a nameplate for, I have to go back up to title, new title, based on template. Make sure my BH1 title is selected, type the new name of the individual, okay, and now I have two titles I can use for this one. I can bring this one in, and this is the one I could change to M Stokely, and this one is Mr. Stokely. You know, if I had the need to do something like that. Okay, so just make sure that when you're using multiple BH1 titles, you create different ones. Okay, you can't use the same title for multiple people because you'll see it change. Now that I have two, I have to be very certain that I double click these before I try to edit, so that I'm activating the one that I'm actually wanting to edit instead of accidentally changing one, you know, and then it messes up. I have to try to find where I screwed up and what I did wrong. Okay, all right, so those are generic, our BH1 template titles. Next, I want to show you how you can create your own title. So let's say that we have this shot here of an Xbox. And let's say that I want to have the Xbox in the background, but I want to put like a statistic or a percentage on the screen, and I want to put some numbers and words up there. So in order to do that, I can go to Title, New Title, and Default Still. Now these other two are these are moving words. So like a roll would be I believe those are the words that roll left to right. Okay, so you have like words like go across the screen. And then you have crawl, which would crawl up the screen. Now those may be inverted. I may actually have those confused, but those are your moving titles there. We just want a default still. We don't want anything that's doing fancy that starts off screen and flies on the screen and flies off. That's excessive. So we do default still. This is where it asks you to name it. Okay, so we would just name it. Let's name it Xbox. Okay, now what I have here, it automatically activates it, and I just have a blank workspace here. I'm actually going to go ahead and drag it into frame. So here's my Xbox title is there, and it's playing, but I actually don't see anything there because I don't have anything in my title yet. So we'll double click it, make sure that's activated. And now I want to click the T over here. The T is your type tool. This allows you to create a text box in this so you can type whatever you want. There's also the vertical type tool, which allows you to type words that are moving vertically instead of horizontally. Okay, so we're going to actually, and these are pathing, but we're going to use a regular type tool. And I'm going to create a text box in this. So I'm going to click anywhere in here and drag and make this box that I want my text to appear in. So that looks about right. Let's just do this. Okay. Now you have your standard controls here that you usually have for typing, like in Word. So we're going to center it. So you see my cursor blinking there. And I'm going to say 42%. I'm just typing now, of Americans own an Xbox. Okay. And there's my text. So it's really difficult to see that, right? It's kind of small. So there are a couple effects I can use to modify my title. This number up here is the size of your text. So as long as your text box is selected, you see my squares around here, that means I have this box selected. It's going to adjust the size of every bit of text within that box. So as I click and hold that 100 and pull to the right on my mouse, it's increasing the size of that. So boom, there we go, right? So now I have a 299 font text of 42% of Americans own an Xbox. Now this still doesn't look good on this image here. So we're going to add one more thing to this. I'm going to add a shadow. Shadows help distinguish your text from the background that's around it. So if we look over in the title properties on the right side, there are several different things we can adjust over here. I can adjust the color of the text. That's fill type. That's what's filled inside the text. Okay, that's white, so we're going to leave that. I can add an outer stroke, which basically gives a little outline to your letters. I'll show you. That was an inner stroke, sorry. I'll add an outer stroke, see? So it's just a small little black outline. That could possibly work for you to make it kind of pop and stand out. But the best option, I believe, is a shadow. So we'll add shadow, and you could see it just a little bit. You can see the difference. And then you can control the effects of your shadow. We can make our shadow darker or stand out more instead of being a little transparent. We can set that to, let's say, 75%. I can change how far my shadow protrudes away from my text. That's distance. So you can see it over here. See, there it is. So we have, we don't want it like that. That's casting a huge shadow. So we can set this at, let's say, 15. It looks pretty good. Actually, let's go back to 10. Size is how thick the shadow is. See, so now our shadow is pretty massive. We'll scale that back down a little bit because it doesn't look good. Then spread, it's kind of the same thing. It's how far does that shadow spread out from where its initial point is. Okay, and then we also have angle, which controls which direction the light is coming from to cast the shadow. Right now it's kind of casting it to the bottom right. So if I move that angle, now it's shifting to the left. Now it's up top. See, so I can control all those little things like that to basically just kind of dictate in what direction my shadow is moving. So I kind of like that. Now let's say I wasn't happy with the font. I can click up here and have all of these different fonts to choose from. I'm going to change it to Myriad Hebrew, and then I need to scale it down because it doesn't fit in my text box anymore. There it is. 42% of Americans own an Xbox, and I can see that very clearly in my video. Hit play. and it pops up. Okay. Now, one thing you might want to do with this, again, I talked about this in a previous video. If you're putting text up there like that, it might be a good idea to blur your background. There it is. Okay. Now, my advice is I would fade into that blur. I wouldn't keep it there. So let's do a couple of little tricks here. I'll show you something neat you can do with your titles. We're going to cross dissolve the beginning and the end of the title, so the title fades in and fades out. This fades in, fades out. Okay. Now the other thing I want to do is I actually want my video to not be blurry before the title, but I want it to be blurry during the title. Okay. So there's a couple different ways I can do that, but I'm going to show you a really simplistic way. I'll show you the little more complicated way in the future, but for now let's just keep it simple. So here is where my title begins. Okay, it's starting there. I can cut my video. So now I have two separate video files, right? This one has the blur on it, and so does this one. I want to take the blur out of here. So we'll go to Effect Controls. There's my blur. Click it, delete it. Okay. Now watch. Boom. So there's a big difference between solid, clear video and blurry video, but it still doesn't look right, right? I don't want it to just, boom, just change to blur. That doesn't look right. So what I'll do is I can add a cross dissolve, which will now blend the non-blurry video with the blurry video. See, it's not as harsh when we do it that way. So there are a couple little tricks you can do to incorporate putting text on your screen. Play around with these tools in your title. You can bold your text, italicize, and underline. If you only wanted to underline, let's say Americans, you would have to specifically just highlight Americans and then click your underline. Otherwise, it would underline everything in the text box. So those are titles. We use those with nearly every single video production. It is probably the most complicated aspect of us, even though it's not complicated in and of itself. Comparatively speaking to everything else, it can be very difficult. So take your time with it and practice and try to incorporate not only nameplates for the people that we're interviewing, but also text on the screen as well.